While I was living peacefully in the country, I inherited an apartment from my father, only to discover my son had sold it without my permission. My lawyer analyzed the documents and said, "Foolish boy." The next day, when my son called me, bragging about the money, the truth hit him like a ton of bricks. But let me tell you how a 63-year-old mother, one everyone thought was too old and too naive, turned silence into her most powerful weapon. It all started 3 weeks ago, when I got that call from Gregory, my lawyer. I was on my porch, watching the evening settle over the endless fields surrounding my little refuge. I had lived there ever since my husband died, 5 years ago. The city just did not make sense to me without him. The country gave me peace. It gave me space to breathe, to remember without the noise of the world crushing me. "Eleanor," Gregory said, with that voice I recognized immediately, the one he used when something was terribly wrong. "I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning. It is urgent. It is about the apartment your father left you." I felt a pit in my stomach. That apartment in the city was the last thing I had left of my dad, of Arthur. It was more than bricks and windows. It was his legacy, his way of telling me he would always be looking out for me, even after he was gone. I could not sleep that night. I tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling, trying to imagine what could have happened. Tax problems? A difficult tenant? I never imagined the truth. I never imagined that my own son, Ryan, the person I carried in my womb, who I raised with all my love, could betray me like that. The next morning, I drove almost 2 hours to Gregory's office. The city streets seemed louder than ever, more hostile. When I arrived, he was waiting for me with a manila folder on his desk. His face was serious, tense. He invited me to sit and closed the door behind me. The silence in that office was heavy, as if the air itself knew what I was about to hear. "Eleanor," he began, opening the folder slowly, as if it pained him to show me what was inside. "Your apartment was sold 2 weeks ago." The words hit me like stones. "Sold?" I repeated, not understanding. "How can it be sold? I have not sold anything." Gregory took a deep breath and slid the papers toward me. "You were not the one who sold it. It was Ryan. He used a power of attorney in your name and signed the sale. The apartment already has a new owner, Eleanor. And the money? The money is already in your son's accounts." I felt the floor disappear from under me. My hands were shaking as I took the documents. There it was, the deed of sale, the signatures, the official stamps. And there, on page 3, was my supposed signature. But I knew that signature was not mine. It might have looked similar, yes, but I knew my own handwriting, the little details that only I noticed. "I did not sign this," I said in a broken voice. Gregory nodded. "I know. That is why I called you immediately." He explained that Ryan had used a power of attorney I had signed years ago when I was sick and needed someone to handle some paperwork while I recovered. That power of attorney gave him the power to act in my name, but only for a limited time. "Here is the detail, Eleanor," Gregory said. And in his voice, I detected something that was not just anger, but almost satisfaction. This power of attorney expired 3 months ago. Ryan used it when it no longer had any legal validity. And furthermore, he forged your signature on several supplementary documents. I looked up at him, still not understanding the magnitude of what that meant. "And what does that mean?" I asked. Gregory leaned back in his chair, and for the first time that morning, I saw something close to a smile on his face. "It means, Eleanor, that your son made a crucial mistake. A mistake that is going to destroy him. Because that sale is completely null, illegal. And not only does he have to return the apartment, but he could face criminal charges for document forgery and fraud." The words floated around me, but I still could not fully process them. My son. My Ryan. The little boy who once held my hand so tightly when he was afraid of the dark. The young man who hugged me at his father's funeral and promised he would always be there for me. That same man had just sold me out, betrayed me, stolen the only thing my father had left me. Why did he do it? I whispered, though deep down, I already knew the answer. Money. It had always been about the money. Ever since he married Jessica. Ever since he started living in that big house in the upscale neighborhood. Ever since he started surrounding himself with people who measured success only in dollars and appearances. I had become invisible to him. I was just the old mother living in the country, unimportant, voiceless, worthless. "I do not know, Eleanor," Gregory replied. "But what I do know is that he completely underestimated the wrong person." He looked me straight in the eye. "Foolish boy," he muttered, almost to himself, as he organized the papers. "Foolish boy." I left that office with shaky legs, but with something else inside me, something I had not felt in a long time. It was not just rage, it was not just pain, it was determination. It was the absolute certainty that I was not going to let this stand. Ryan had made the mistake of believing that because I lived in the country, because I was 63 years old, because I was his quiet, patient mother, I was an easy woman to fool. But what he did not know, what no one in my family seemed to remember, was that silence is not weakness. Silence can be patience. Silence can be strategy. And I had learned, over these years of solitude and reflection, that sometimes silence is the most powerful weapon you can have. I drove back to the country with the windows down, feeling the wind hit my face. The rain had stopped, and the sky was beginning to open up, letting golden rays of light pass between the gray clouds. In my purse, I carried a copy of all the documents Gregory had given me. And in my mind, a plan was beginning to form. Because if Ryan thought this was over, he was dead wrong. This was just beginning. To understand how we got here, I need to take you back 5 years, when my life was completely different, when my husband was still alive and I was a woman who believed in promises, in family, in the idea that blood would always be thicker than anything. How naive I was. We lived in the city then, in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew each other. My husband worked as an accountant, and I gave sewing classes from home. We did not have much, but we had enough. We had love, we had laughter, we had those little routines that make life worthwhile. On Sunday mornings, I would make coffee with cinnamon, and he would read the newspaper on the porch. Those were our sacred moments. Ryan was already married by then. He had fallen in love with Jessica, a beautiful woman with a perfect smile who worked in marketing for a big corporation. From the beginning, I noticed something about her. It was not exactly malice. It was more like ambition. An ambition that glittered in her eyes every time she talked about promotions, bigger houses, newer cars, and Ryan, my son, let himself get dragged into that world of appearances. Little by little, the visits became less frequent, the calls got shorter, and when they did come to see us, there was always a tension in the air, as if they were fulfilling an obligation rather than enjoying a family moment. Jessica would look at our house with that expression she thought was discreet, but that I noticed perfectly. That look that said poor people, settling for so little. Then my husband got sick. It was fast, brutal, merciless pancreatic cancer. In 6 months, he went from being a strong, vital man to a shadow of himself. Ryan came to the funeral, of course. He cried in my arms. He told me he would always be there for me, that he would never leave me alone. Jessica kept her distance, in her impeccable eggplant-colored dress and dark sunglasses, as if grief was something that could stain. After the burial, I could not stand to be in that house full of memories. Every corner reminded me of him. Every sound was an echo of his absence. That was when my father, Arthur, suggested I move to the country. He had a small cottage there, where he used to spend weekends. "Go and heal," he told me, "with that wisdom only fathers have. The quiet of the country heals what the noise of the city breaks." And he was right. I moved to the country and found a peace I never knew existed. I learned to live with less, to value the sunrise, the songbirds, the feeling of the earth beneath my bare feet. I learned that solitude is not always sadness. Sometimes it is freedom. I planted a small herb garden. I adopted 2 cats that showed up one day and decided to stay. I read all the books I never had time to read. Ryan barely called, maybe once a month. Brief conversations where he talked about his projects, his investments, his plans to buy an even bigger house. He never asked how I was really doing. He never wanted to come visit me in the country. "It is too far, Mom," he always said. "You know how the traffic is," as if a 2-hour drive was the end of the world. My sister, Carol, who lived in the city near where Ryan had bought his new house, always defended him. "He is a busy man, Eleanor," she would tell me when I complained about his distance. "He has responsibilities, a wife, a career. He cannot be looking after you all the time. And I would keep quiet, because arguing with Carol was like talking to a wall. She had always preferred Ryan. Ever since he was a boy, she said he would go far, that he had something special. And I, according to her, was too overprotective, too dramatic, too needy. Then my father died. Arthur, the man who taught me to sew, to cook, to stand firm when life tried to bend me. He was 87 years old, and he passed in his sleep, peacefully, just as he always wanted. But his death left a void that I still feel in my chest today. The day before he died, he called me into his hospital room. We were alone. He took my hand with that surprising strength he still had and pulled a key from his pocket. "This is for you," he told me. "The apartment where I lived all these years. It is in your name, in my will. I want it to be your security, your backup. Promise me you will never sell it out of necessity, but only when you decide it is the right time." I promised him. With tears running down my cheeks, I promised him I would care for that legacy, just as he had cared for me my whole life. That key became my most precious treasure. I kept it in a small wooden box by my bed, and sometimes, on difficult nights, I would hold it in my fingers and feel that Dad was still with me, still protecting me. The apartment was in a good part of the city, near the main park. It was not huge, but it was bright, well-maintained, and according to Gregory, worth around $250,000 in the current market. I never thought about selling it. It was my safety net, yes, but it was more than that. It was the last physical connection I had to my father, the place where he spent his last happy years, where I visited him every Sunday for tea to listen to his stories. Ryan knew about the apartment, of course. He was at the reading of the will. I saw his eyes light up when the lawyer mentioned the estimated value of the property. Jessica squeezed his hand and whispered something in his ear. I pretended not to notice, but I noticed. I always notice everything. After Dad's funeral, Ryan visited me in the country for the first time in 2 years. He came alone, without Jessica, which surprised me. I thought that maybe he had finally remembered he had a mother, that maybe our shared grief would bring us closer again. How foolish I was. He sat in my small kitchen, drank the coffee I made him, and said, "Mom, that apartment is too much for you. You should sell it and invest the money in something that gives you returns. I can help with that. I know some good opportunities." I looked him in the eye and told him no, that the apartment was staying with me until the day I decided otherwise. I saw the frustration on his face, that impatient look he got when things did not go his way. But he did not insist that day. He said goodbye with a cold hug and left. I should have known then. I should have seen the signs. But a mother always wants to believe the best of her children, even when all the evidence points to the contrary. 6 months went by. I continued my routine in the country, tending my garden, reading, living the simple life I loved so much. Then I got sick. A bad respiratory infection that left me in bed for weeks. Ryan appeared, seemingly worried, and offered to handle some bank errands while I recovered. I needed someone to pay a few bills, manage the mail. I signed that power of attorney without thinking too much. He was my son. I trusted him. That trust was my mistake. A mistake that was about to cost me everything my father had left me. But it was also the mistake Ryan made in underestimating me. Because what he did not know was that I was no longer the same woman who had signed that document. The country had changed me. The solitude had taught me. And the silence had given me a clarity I never had before. Ryan thought that because I lived far away, because I was older, because I was alone, I was invisible. He thought I was a harmless old woman he could manipulate without consequences. But he was about to find out that women like me, the ones who have survived loss, betrayal, and years of being underestimated, are the most dangerous when we finally decide to fight back. The days after that meeting with Gregory were strange. I kept up my routine in the country, watering the plants, feeding the cats, preparing my meals, but everything felt unreal, as if I were acting in a play where I already knew the tragic ending. Every time I looked at the little wooden box where I kept the apartment key, I felt a mix of rage and sadness so deep it was hard to breathe. But I could not fall apart. Not yet. Gregory had told me I needed to stay calm, act intelligently, not let my emotions control me. "Eleanor," he had said before I left his office, The most important thing now is that Ryan does not know that you know. If he suspects you have found out, he could try to hide the money, create more false documents, complicate the whole legal process. We need him to feel safe, confident, victorious. Because confident men make mistakes. And we are going to use every single one of those mistakes against him. So I waited. For 3 whole days, I waited, doing nothing but living my life as usual, while inside I felt like I was burning up. Gregory was working on gathering all the necessary evidence, certified copies of the original power of attorney with the expiration dates clearly marked, analysis of the forged signatures, bank records of the transaction. Everything had to be perfect, irrefutable, undeniable. It was on the afternoon of the 4th day that my phone rang. Ryan's name appeared on the screen, and I felt my heart speed up. I took 3 deep breaths before answering. "Hello?" I said, with the calmest voice I could muster. "Mom," he exclaimed, and in his tone there was something I had not heard in years. Genuine excitement, almost euphoria. "How are you? It has been a while since we talked." "I am fine, son," I replied, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "And you? How are things?" There was a pause, and then I heard that laugh he used to have as a child, but that now sounded hollow, fake. "Mom, things are going incredibly well. In fact, I am calling because I just closed the best deal of my life, an investment that is going to completely change our future. Our future." As if he and I still shared anything other than a last name and poisoned blood. "That is wonderful, son," I said, keeping my voice neutral, emotionless. "I am happy for you." I hoped he would hang up soon, that this would just be one of those superficial conversations we had from time to time. But no, he wanted more. He wanted to brag. "You know what, Mom? I was finally able to do something with Grandpa's apartment." The words landed like ice in my stomach. Just like that, casual, as if he were talking about the weather. "What apartment?" I asked, even though I knew perfectly well what he was talking about. I needed to hear him say the words. I needed that confession to feed the fury growing inside me. "The apartment Grandpa left you," he said, with that exaggerated patience one uses with children or confused old people. "You know, Mom, that place was just losing value sitting empty. The taxes, the maintenance, all of that was costing you money you did not need to spend. So I made the decision to sell it. I got an excellent buyer. He paid in cash, $240,000. Isn't that fantastic?" I closed my eyes. $240,000. $10,000 less than the apartment's real value, probably because he had to sell it quickly, without negotiating properly, in a hurry to get the money. "Ryan," I said slowly, "that apartment was mine. My father left it to me." I heard him sigh, as if he were dealing with a childish tantrum. "Mom, I know it was yours. That is why all the money is saved for you. Well, most of it. I had to take a small commission for managing everything. You know, the lawyers, the paperwork, my time. But the rest is safe, invested in a fund that will give you monthly returns. You do not have to worry about anything anymore. Jessica and I took care of everything. Jessica and I. Of course, Jessica was involved. It was probably her idea from the start. And you did not think to ask me before doing all this?" I said. And something in my tone must have alerted him, because there was a brief silence before he answered. "Mom, you live out in the middle of nowhere, with no internet, no easy access to the city. I thought it was better to just get it all resolved and give you the good news afterward. Besides, I used the power of attorney you gave me. Everything was legal, everything was correct. You trust me, right?" The question hung in the air like poison. "Of course I trust you," I lied, because I needed him to keep talking, to keep confessing. "You are my son." I heard him relax on the other end of the line. "Exactly. I am your son, and I am always going to look out for you. Look, the money is in a special account. I am going to mail you the documents so you can review them. But believe me, Mom, this was for the best. That old apartment was just costing you money. Now you have liquidity, you have investments, you have a future." In the background, far away, I heard Jessica's voice. I could not make out the words, but the tone was urgent, almost nervous. "Mom, I have to go," Ryan said quickly. "Jessica is calling me. But I will see you soon, okay?" I will drive out to the country in a few days to explain everything calmly. I love you." And he hung up before I could reply. I sat there in my small living room, the phone still in my hand, watching the sun begin to set behind the hills. My son had just confessed his crime, without even realizing it. He had admitted to selling the apartment using the power of attorney, to taking a commission from the money, that it was all done without my knowledge or permission. And he had done it with that characteristic arrogance of someone who believes they are smarter than everyone else. I dialed Gregory's number. He answered on the second ring. "Eleanor." "He just called me," I said. "Ryan." He told me everything. He told me he sold the apartment, that he used the power of attorney, that he kept part of the money, everything. He confessed everything. There was a silence, and then I heard something that sounded almost like satisfaction in Gregory's voice. "Perfect. That is exactly what we needed." "Did you record the conversation?" My heart sank. I had not. I had not even thought of it. "No," I admitted, suddenly feeling stupid. But Gregory did not seem worried. "It does not matter. With what we already have, it is enough. The expired power of attorney, the forged signatures, the bank records. And now we know exactly how much money he got, and that he himself admits to taking a cut. This is pure gold, Eleanor. So what do we do now?" I asked. "Now we wait for him to visit you," Gregory said. "When he comes, you are going to act completely normal. You are going to let him explain everything. Let him show you the documents he will surely bring to justify himself. And you are going to record him. You are going to record every word he says. Can you do that?" I thought of my father, of how he had taught me that dignity is not in shouting, but in standing firm. I thought of all those years Ryan had treated me as invisible, as a burden, as someone whose opinion did not matter. And I felt something inside me harden, turn cold and sharp as steel. "Yes," I said, "I can do that." "Good," Gregory replied. "Because he made a mistake, Eleanor. A huge mistake. He used an expired power of attorney, forged documents, and appropriated money that did not belong to him. And he did it thinking you would never find out, that you would never do anything about it, that you are just a helpless old woman living in the country. That was his crucial error. And now we are going to make him pay for every lie, for every fake signature, for every dollar he stole." I hung up the phone and stared at the rain that had started to fall again, droplets hitting my windowpane like tears I could no longer shed. Because something had changed in me during that conversation. I was no longer just the wounded mother. I was no longer the silent victim. I was a woman who had decided to fight. And when a 63-year-old woman, who has survived loss and betrayal, finally decides to fight back, there is no force on earth that can stop her. Ryan had said he would come in a few days. Perfect. I would be ready. With my recorder. With my questions. With my silence turned weapon. Because he thought this was over. He thought he had won. But the truth was, this was just beginning. Ryan arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, driving his new silver car that shined under the sun as if it were a jewel. I watched him park in front of my house and felt my stomach twist, but I kept my face neutral, calm. I had practiced this for days. In front of the mirror, I had rehearsed every expression, every word, every gesture. I needed to be the confused but trusting mother, not the woman who already knew the whole truth. He got out of the car with a green folder under his arm, and that smile that once melted my heart. "Mom!" he exclaimed, walking toward me with his arms open. He hugged me, and I reciprocated, feeling my body tense against my will. He smelled of that expensive cologne Jessica always bought him, a scent that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. "Come in, son," I said, stepping aside. I made coffee and cookies. We went into my small living room, and he looked around with that expression I already knew, that barely disguised mix of pity and superiority. He sat on my worn fabric sofa and placed the folder on the wooden coffee table. I had placed my phone on the bookshelf behind him, discreetly recording. Gregory had shown me how to activate it without it being obvious. "Well, Mom," he began, opening the folder with calculated, almost theatrical movements, "I brought you all the documents for the apartment. I want you to see that everything was done correctly, all legal, all with your well-being in mind." He took out several papers and spread them on the table. I looked at them without really seeing them. Because I already knew them. Gregory had shown me copies of everything. Here is the deed of sale, he said, pointing with his index finger. As you can see, the price was excellent, $240,000. Paid in full, and here is the record of the account where I deposited the money. Well, most of the money. He paused and looked at me with an expression that I guess was meant to be honest. I had to take $30,000 as compensation for all the work. The lawyers, the paperwork, my time. It was a complicated process, Mom. But the other $210,000 are right here, invested in this fund that will give you returns of 5% annually. $30,000. $30,000 he had simply taken as if it were his right. And why did you not consult me before doing all this? I asked in a soft, almost timid voice. He sighed, as if he had expected that question and already had the perfect answer prepared. Mom, you live out here, so far from everything. No internet, no landline, no easy way to communicate. And there was a very interested buyer who needed a quick answer. If I waited, we could have lost the opportunity. Besides, I used the power of attorney you gave me, so everything was completely legal. You trusted me to handle your affairs, remember? His words sounded reasonable, convincing. He had probably convinced many people with that tone. Of course I remember, I said, picking up my coffee cup to have something to do with my trembling hands. It was when I was sick. I needed help with some paperwork. Exactly, he replied, smiling as if I finally understood. And that power of attorney gave me the power to act on your behalf. For your own good, Mom. Always for your good. I took a sip of coffee and looked at him over the rim of the cup. Son, I hope you did everything right, that all the papers are in order. Something crossed his face, something quick that might have been nervousness, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Of course, Mom. Everything is perfect. You can rest easy. We talked a little more. He told me about his plans, about how that apartment money had allowed him to make an important investment in some tech business. He told me about Jessica, about how happy she was, about how they would soon be able to buy an even bigger house in an exclusive neighborhood. And as he spoke, all I could think was how every word he said was just another rope for the noose he was tying around his own neck. He left after 2 hours, with another superficial hug and empty promises to visit more often. I watched him drive away in his shiny car and waited until he was completely out of sight before I picked up the phone and stopped the recording. I had gotten it. I had his full confession, with details, with numbers, with his admission that he used the power of attorney without consulting me. I called Gregory immediately. I have everything, I told him, and my voice trembled not with fear, but with something like anticipated victory. Perfect, Eleanor. Send it to me right now. With this and everything else we have gathered, we can proceed. There was triumph in his voice, too. But my triumph was short-lived. The next day, my sister Carol showed up unannounced. She arrived in her cream-colored car, her face tense and her lips pressed into a thin line. I knew immediately that Ryan had told her something. Probably his version, his carefully constructed lie. Eleanor, she said as soon as she crossed the threshold, without even a proper greeting, what is this I hear about you making trouble over Dad's apartment? I stared at her, surprised by her accusatory tone. Trouble? Carol. Ryan sold my apartment without my permission. He used false documents. You do not think that is a problem? She waved her hand, as if shooing away an annoying fly. Ryan explained everything to me. He used the power of attorney you gave him. It was all legal, and he did it thinking of you, so you would not have to worry about that apartment that was just costing you money. Her words were almost identical to Ryan's. They had clearly coordinated their story. The power of attorney was expired, I said in a firm voice. He had no right to use it. Carol looked at me as if I were crazy. Oh, Eleanor, always so dramatic, always exaggerating everything. He is your son, for God's sake. Your own son? Do you really think he would steal from you? That he would do something bad to you? I felt the rage begin to boil inside me. Carol, I have proof. I have documents showing the power of attorney was not valid, that he forged my signature on several papers. This is not drama, this is fraud. But she shook her head, with that superior expression she always had, as if I were a foolish child who did not understand how the world worked. You know what I think, Eleanor? I think you are bitter. I think you live out here alone, with nothing to do, and you invent problems where there are none. Ryan is a successful man, with a brilliant career. Do you really think he needs to steal from you? He has his own money, his own life. What he did was help you, and instead of thanking him, you are accusing him of being a criminal. Her words hit me like slaps. So you do not believe me? I asked, and my voice sounded smaller than I wanted. It is not that I do not believe you, Eleanor, she said, softening her tone slightly. It is that I think you are confused. Maybe you misunderstood something. Maybe that lawyer of yours is putting ideas in your head. But to take this to court, to accuse your own son, to destroy your family over a misunderstanding, is it worth it? It is not a misunderstanding, I insisted, feeling tears begin to well in my eyes, tears I refused to shed in front of her. It is theft. It is fraud. And I am not going to stay quiet just because he is my son. Carol sighed deeply, as if she were dealing with someone impossible. Then do it, she said finally, her voice cold. Destroy your son. Send him to jail. Ruin his life. But when this is all over and you are left completely alone, without a son, without a family, without anyone, do not come crying to me. Because this, Eleanor, this is your decision. And you are going to have to live with the consequences. And without another word, she turned and walked out of my house, leaving the door open behind her. I stood in the middle of my living room, shaking, feeling the world tilt in a strange way. My sister, the person who was supposed to support me, had chosen Ryan's side. She had called me dramatic, confused, bitter. She had minimized my son's crime as if it were a simple family misunderstanding. And in that moment, I understood something I probably should have understood a long time ago. I was completely alone in this. I did not have my sister. I did not have my son. I had no family who would defend me or believe in me. I only had myself. And Gregory, a lawyer who, at the end of the day, would go home, and I would still be the 63-year-old woman living alone in the country, fighting against everyone. But maybe that was enough. Maybe I was enough. Because the truth does not need a crowd to remain the truth. Justice does not become less just simply because I am alone in seeking it. And if I had to fight this battle with no one by my side, then so be it. I called Gregory that same night. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" he asked, after I told him about Carol's visit. "Your sister is right about one thing. This is going to be hard. It is going to be painful. Your family is going to be against you. Are you prepared for that?" I looked out the window into the darkness of the countryside, at the stars shining in the clear sky. I thought of my father, of how he had taught me that some things are worth fighting for, even if they cost you everything. I thought of the promise I made him to protect his legacy, and I thought of the woman I had become during these years of solitude, a woman who was no longer afraid of silence or of being alone. "Yes," I said in a firm voice, "I am prepared." Because they thought my silence was weakness. They thought that because I was alone, because I was older, because I lived far away, I was someone they could ignore, manipulate, and steal from. But they were wrong. And now they are going to learn that silence can also be a weapon, and I have learned how to use it. 2 weeks passed since Carol's visit. 2 weeks in which Gregory worked on preparing all the necessary legal documentation to present the case before a judge. I tried to maintain my normal routine, but everything felt different. The garden that once gave me peace now seemed too quiet. The cats that were once company now only reminded me of how alone I was in this fight. One afternoon, while I was watering the basil plants growing by the kitchen window, I heard a car stop in front of my house. I did not recognize the vehicle, a dark gray sedan with city plates. My heart began to beat faster. Was it Ryan? Had he found out I was suing him? But the person who got out of the car was not Ryan. It was Jessica, his wife. The woman who had always looked at me with that mix of pity and disdain, as if I were a piece of old furniture someone forgot to throw out. But now, as she walked toward my door, something about her was different. Her shoulders were slumped, her makeup-free face showed deep dark circles, and her hands were trembling as she knocked on my door. I opened it slowly, not knowing what to expect. "Jessica," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I had never seen before. Genuine fear. "Eleanor," she said in a broken voice, "can I come in? Please, I need to talk to you." I hesitated for a moment, but something in her desperation made me step aside. We went into the living room, and she sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped in her lap. I noticed she was not wearing her wedding ring. "I do not know where to start," she said, her voice trembling. "Ryan does not know I am here. If he finds out, he will. I do not know what he will do." I watched her in silence, waiting. After years of being invisible to her, now she needed something from me. "I did not know," she began, and tears started to roll down her cheeks. "I swear to God, I did not know what he did was illegal. Ryan told me you had given him permission, that you had signed all the papers, that you were fine with the sale. He lied to me, Eleanor. He lied to me too." Her words came out in a rush, desperate. 3 days ago, I found some documents in his study. I was looking for the tax receipts, and I found a folder hidden in the back of a drawer. It had copies of the power of attorney, copies of your signature, and drafts. Drafts where he was practicing your signature, Eleanor. Sheets and sheets of paper where he copied your name over and over until he got it perfect. My blood ran cold. Jessica pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I took pictures of everything. I did not know what to do with them, but I knew I needed to have them, because when I confronted Ryan, when I asked him what it all meant, he got furious. He told me to stay out of his business, that I did not understand anything, that everything he did was for our future. She slid the phone across the table toward me. I picked up the phone and started looking at the photos. There they were, clear as day, pages full of my signature, practiced over and over. Documents with notes in the margin in Ryan's handwriting. Needs to be more slanted. The E needs to curve more. Practice until identical. It was irrefutable evidence of premeditation, of criminal intent. "There is more," Jessica said, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "The money from the sale. Ryan told me he had invested most of it in a secure fund for you, but I checked our bank accounts. Of the total money, only $120,000 are in any investment in your name. The rest. He used it to pay off debts I did not even know we had. Debts from failed investments, from loans he took out to maintain our lifestyle. $120,000. Out of the $240,000 he had gotten for my apartment. Only half was supposedly saved for me. And likely, not even that was truly secure. Why are you telling me all this?" I finally asked. Jessica looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "Because this is wrong. Because I do not want to be an accomplice to this. Because when I married Ryan, I thought he was an honest, hard-working man, ambitious in a good way. But this is not ambition, Eleanor. This is theft. This is betraying your own mother. And I cannot. I will not be a part of it." Her voice broke completely. "I have already hired a divorce lawyer. I am leaving the house. But before I did, I needed you to know the whole truth." "Are you willing to testify?" I asked, and my voice sounded harsher than I intended. She nodded slowly. "Yes, I will testify. I will hand over all the proof I have, the documents, the photos, the bank records. Everything." She stood up, still shaking. "I know I was never good to you. I know I treated you as if you were less than us. And I am sorry. I am truly sorry. Ryan convinced me that you did not understand the modern world, that you were just a stubborn old woman. But the truth is, you were the only honest person in this whole family." After Jessica left, I sat in my living room for hours, holding her phone with all those incriminating photos. I called Gregory and told him everything. I heard his breath catch as I described the evidence. "Eleanor, this is more than I hoped for. With this, we can not only nullify the sale, we can press serious criminal charges, premeditated document forgery. This could mean years in prison for him." "And Jessica?" I asked. "If she testifies, will she be protected?" Gregory thought for a moment. "We can negotiate immunity for her in exchange for her testimony. She did not actively participate in the fraud. She was just deceived, like you. A reasonable prosecutor will accept the deal." There was a pause. "Eleanor, are you sure you want to go this far?" This is not just about getting your apartment back anymore. This could completely destroy Ryan. I looked out the window at the fields that had given me refuge all these years. I thought of my father, of his voice telling me to protect the legacy he left me. I thought of all the times Ryan had made me feel invisible, insignificant, stupid. I thought of how he had meticulously planned to steal from me, practicing my signature like a common criminal. He destroyed himself, I said finally. I am just making sure he faces the consequences of his actions. Proceed with everything, Gregory. With everything. I hung up the phone and realized I was not shaking anymore. I no longer felt fear or doubt. I felt something different, something powerful. I felt certainty. The certainty that I was doing the right thing, no matter how much it hurt. Jessica had given me the final weapon. The irrefutable proof that Ryan had not made an impulsive mistake, but a calculated and deliberate crime. And now, with that evidence in my hands, there was no way he could escape. The net was closing around him, and he did not even know it yet. The following days were a whirlwind of legal activity. Gregory worked almost without sleep, preparing every document, every piece of evidence, every argument we would present to the judge. Jessica had formally sent over all the photos and documents she found in Ryan's study. Her divorce lawyer had already contacted Gregory to coordinate her testimony in exchange for immunity. I, for my part, tried to stay calm in the midst of the approaching storm. Every morning I woke up with a knot in my stomach, wondering if this would be the day Ryan discovered what was about to happen to him. But Gregory had assured me that everything would be kept confidential until the exact moment of filing the lawsuit with the court. One afternoon, while I was making chamomile tea in my small kitchen, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, but something made me pick up. "Eleanor," said a man's voice I did not immediately recognize. "This is Arthur." It took me a moment to place the name. Arthur. My father's name? No, wait. I was confused. I did not have another son. "Arthur?" I repeated, confused. "Yes, Arthur Harrison. I am the accountant who worked on the sale of the apartment. I need to speak with you urgently." My heart sped up. "What is it?" There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. "I prefer not to speak over the phone. Can I visit you tomorrow morning?" "It is about irregularities I found in the transaction. Irregularities that I think you should know about." The next day, Arthur Harrison arrived at my house, driving a modest car. He was a man in his 50s, with thick glasses and a serious expression. He sat in my living room, declining the coffee I offered, too nervous for courtesies. "Mrs. Eleanor," he began, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "I was the accountant Ryan, hired to handle the financial aspects of your apartment's sale. At the time, he assured me that everything was authorized by you, that he had your full permission. But a week ago," he continued, "I received a call from the Public Records Office asking about certain discrepancies in the documents. That made me review everything again, more carefully. And I found things that do not add up, ma'am. Things that make me think that I, unknowingly, participated in something illegal." He opened the folder and showed me several documents full of numbers and official stamps. "Look here," he said, pointing to a specific date. "This is the date you supposedly signed the authorization of sale. But according to medical records I managed to obtain, you were hospitalized that day for complications from your respiratory infection. It is impossible for you to have signed anything." I felt my breathing stop. That was another piece of evidence, another proof of the forgery. "And there is more," Arthur continued, his voice trembling slightly. "The numbers do not match. Ryan told me the apartment sold for $240,000. But when I checked the official transaction records, the real price was $260,000. Someone pocketed an extra $20,000 that never appeared on any official document. And ma'am, I signed those papers believing everything was legitimate. My professional reputation is at risk." I looked at him steadily. "Why are you telling me this?" Arthur took off his glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. "Because I am an honest professional, Mrs. Eleanor. I have worked for 30 years as an accountant, and I have never, ever been involved in anything fraudulent. When I realized what had really happened, I knew I had two choices: stay quiet and be an accomplice, or come here and tell you the truth. I chose my conscience over my fear. Are you willing to testify? I asked directly. He nodded slowly. Yes. I have already contacted my own lawyer. I am going to cooperate fully with the authorities. I have copies of all the original documents, all the transaction records, all the emails I exchanged with Ryan, everything. He stood up, visibly shaking. I am very sorry, ma'am. I am sorry I did not realize it sooner. I am sorry I was used as a tool to steal from you. After Arthur left, I immediately called Gregory. When I told him about this new revelation, I heard him let out a long whistle. 260,000. Ryan not only used false documents, he also hid part of the real money from the sale. This is much worse than we thought. Eleanor, this is not just fraud, it is embezzlement, tax evasion, multiple criminal charges. When do we file the suit? I asked, feeling the determination solidify inside me like cooling cast iron. Next week, Gregory replied. I have a meeting with the prosecutor tomorrow. With Jessica testifying, with Arthur testifying, with all the documentary evidence, with the photographs of the practice signatures, with the bank records. Eleanor, this is an airtight case. There is no way Ryan gets out of this. There was a long pause. How do you feel? He was asking me something personal, something that had nothing to do with documents or legal strategies. I stayed silent, really thinking about the answer. How did I feel? I feel sad, I admitted finally. Sad because my son turned out to be someone I did not know. Someone capable of planning for months how to steal from his own mother. Someone who practiced my signature until he perfected it. Who lied to his wife. Who deceived an honest accountant. Who betrayed the memory of his grandfather. I feel sad for the boy he was, and the man he became. But I also, I continued, feeling my voice grow firmer, I feel strong. Stronger than I have felt in years. Because for a long time, I let my family treat me as if I were invisible, as if my opinion did not matter, as if being old and living in the country made me less than them. And now, I am here, standing, fighting for what is mine, for what my father left me, for my dignity. And that, Gregory, that makes me feel powerful. That night, I sat on my porch, watching the stars. The countryside was silent, except for the chirping of crickets and the whisper of the wind through the trees. I thought of my father, of how he would be proud to see me defending his legacy. I thought of my husband, of how he had taught me that true love is not afraid of the truth. I thought of all the years I had lived quietly, accepting, conforming. But those days were over. The woman who signed that power of attorney years ago, trusting and naive, no longer existed. In her place was me, a 63-year-old woman who had learned that age does not make you weak, it makes you wise. That solitude does not make you vulnerable. It teaches you who you really are. That silence is not cowardice, it is strategy. And Ryan was about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. That underestimating someone does not make them weak, it just makes you blind. And blindness, in the legal battlefield that was about to begin, would be his total downfall. The storm was about to break, and I was ready for it. The day of the trial arrived with a gray sky that threatened rain. I dressed in my best clothes, a tan suit I had saved for special occasions, and drove the 2 hours to the city with steady hands on the steering wheel. Gregory had explained the whole procedure to me, but nothing could truly prepare me for the moment I saw my son on the other side of the courtroom. When I entered the room, Ryan was already there, sitting next to his lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who seemed more concerned with checking his phone than with the gravity of the case. Ryan saw me enter, and his face showed genuine surprise. He clearly did not expect me to show up. He probably thought this was just a minor administrative issue, something his lawyer could resolve with a couple of calls and maybe a small payment. I sat on the other side with Gregory at my side. Jessica was there too, in the witness section, carefully avoiding Ryan's gaze. Arthur Harrison, the accountant, was sitting near her, a thick folder on his lap. The room slowly filled the prosecutor, the court clerks, a few onlookers probably there for other cases. When the judge entered, we all stood. He was an older man with completely white hair and a severe expression. He sat, reviewed the documents in front of him for what felt like an eternity, and finally looked up. This is the case of Eleanor Martinez versus Ryan Martinez for fraud, document forgery, and unlawful appropriation of property. Both parties are present. The proceedings began with Gregory, presenting our version of the facts. In a clear, professional voice, he explained how Ryan had used an expired power of attorney, forged my signature, sold my apartment without authorization, and appropriated the money. Every word landed in the room like a heavy stone. I watched Ryan shift uncomfortably in his seat, whispering urgently with his lawyer. "We call our first witness," Gregory said. "Jessica Martinez." Jessica stood up on shaky legs and walked to the stand. After swearing to tell the truth, Gregory began his questioning. "Mrs. Martinez, can you tell us what you found in your husband's study this past October 20th? Jessica took a deep breath and began to speak. Her voice was low, but firm. She described how she had found the sheets where Ryan practiced my signature, how she had photographed everything, how he had lied to her about the origin of the money. "He told me Eleanor had authorized everything," Jessica said, and for the first time, she looked directly at Ryan. "He made me believe she was in agreement, that this was the best thing for her. But when I found those signature practices, when I saw the real documents, I knew he had made me an accomplice to a crime without me knowing it." Ryan's lawyer tried to discredit her testimony. "Is it not true that you are in the process of a divorce and that you might have personal motivations to harm my client?" Jessica looked at him without blinking. "I am in the process of a divorce precisely because I discovered my husband is a criminal. I am not here for revenge. I am here because the right thing to do is to tell the truth." Then it was Arthur Harrison's turn. The accountant presented all the financial records, showing the discrepancies between what Ryan reported and what had actually happened. The real sale price was $260,000, he explained with professional clarity. But Mr. Martinez only reported $240,000. The remaining $20,000 disappeared completely from the official records. "And what conclusion do you draw from that?" Gregory asked. Arthur adjusted his glasses. "That there was intentional concealment of funds. That tax evasion was committed. That I was deceived into participating in a fraudulent transaction." The judge was taking constant notes, his expression growing more serious. Then Gregory presented the photographs Jessica had taken. One by one, the images appeared on the large screen in the courtroom pages and pages of my practiced signature, with notes in the margin in Ryan's handwriting indicating how to perfect it. The evidence was so clear, so irrefutable, that I saw the face of Ryan's lawyer turn increasingly pale. "And finally," Gregory said, "we present the most important document of all." He projected the original power of attorney onto the screen, with the dates clearly visible. This power of attorney, which Mr. Martinez used to sell the apartment, expired on March 15th. The sale took place on June 22nd, 3 months after the document lost all legal validity. The silence in the room was absolute. Furthermore, Gregory continued, "We have medical records proving that Mrs. Eleanor Martinez was hospitalized on the day she supposedly signed the authorization of sale documents. It is physically impossible for her to have been present for that signature." He placed the medical records on the judge's bench. Ryan's lawyer tried to argue that it had all been a misunderstanding, that his client had acted in good faith believing the power of attorney was still valid, that there was no criminal intent. But his words sounded hollow in the face of the mountain of evidence Gregory had presented. The photographs of the practiced signatures destroyed any argument of innocence or unintentional error. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand feeling all eyes on me. I swore to tell the truth and sat down. Gregory asked me simple questions. When I had signed the power of attorney, if I had authorized the sale, if I knew my son planned to sell the apartment. To each question, I answered with the clear, direct truth. But it was when Ryan's lawyer cross-examined me that everything changed. "Mrs. Martinez," he said in a condescending tone, "isn't it true that your son has always taken care of you? That all he was trying to do was protect your interests?" I looked him directly in the eye. "My son," I said in a firm voice, "spent months planning how to steal from me. He practiced my signature until he perfected it. He used documents he knew were expired. He lied to his wife, deceived an honest accountant, and betrayed the memory of his grandfather. That is not taking care of someone. That is a premeditated and calculated crime." I saw Ryan lower his head, unable to meet my gaze. The judge called a 20-minute recess to review all the evidence. During that time, Ryan tried to approach me in the hallway. "Mom," he said in a desperate voice, "please, we can still fix this. I can give you all the money back. We can solve this as a family, without judges, without jail." I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I truly saw who he was. Not my son, but a stranger who shared my blood but not my values. "Ryan," I said calmly, "you had many opportunities to do the right thing. You could have chosen not to steal from me. You could have confessed when I confronted you. You could have returned the money when you were discovered. But you chose to lie, time and time again. Now the consequences of your decisions are not in my hands. They are in the hands of the court." I turned around and went back into the courtroom. When the judge returned, his expression was pure granite. "I have reviewed all the evidence presented in this case," he began, "and I must say, I have rarely seen fraud so deliberate and calculated. The expired power of attorney, the clearly premeditated forged signatures, the concealment of funds, the lies to multiple parties. Mr. Martinez, what you did was not an error in judgment. It was a crime meticulously planned against your own mother. Therefore," the judge continued, "I declare the sale of the apartment null and void. The property must be immediately returned to Mrs. Eleanor Martinez. Furthermore, I order Mr. Ryan Martinez to repay the entirety of the money obtained from the fraudulent sale, plus interest and punitive damages, for a total of $300,000. I felt my breath stop. $300,000, more than the apartment had originally been worth. "And finally," the judge said, looking directly at Ryan, "I am referring this case to the prosecutor to proceed with criminal charges for document forgery, fraud, and unlawful appropriation. Mr. Martinez, you will face a separate criminal trial that could result in a prison sentence. Case closed." The strike of the gavel echoed in the room like thunder. I had won. I had won completely. The days after the trial were strange and quiet. I returned to my house in the country, feeling a huge weight lift from my shoulders, but also a deep sadness that I could not ignore. I had won the legal battle. I had recovered what was mine, but I had lost my son in the process. Or maybe I had simply accepted that I never truly had him. Ryan did not try to contact me. Gregory informed me that he had hired a different criminal lawyer to face the upcoming charges. The criminal process would take months, perhaps years, but the civil verdict was final and immediate. The apartment was legally mine again, and Ryan had 30 days to gather the $300,000 the judge had ordered him to pay. Jessica called me a week after the trial. Her voice sounded different, lighter, as if she could finally breathe. "Eleanor, I just wanted you to know the divorce is moving forward quickly. My lawyer says it should be finalized in 2 months." She paused. "And I want to thank you." The phrase surprised me. "Thank me? Why?" "For having the courage to do the right thing," she replied. "I lived for years with a man who turned out to be a liar and a thief, but I was too afraid to confront him. You were not afraid, and your example gave me the strength to leave that relationship. I am living with my sister now. I am in therapy, and for the first time in years, I feel free." Her words moved me more than I expected. Carol, my sister, also showed up one afternoon unannounced. She arrived with an ashamed expression I had never seen on her before. We sat on my porch, and for a long time, neither of us said anything. Finally, she broke the silence. "You were right," she said simply. "About Ryan. About everything. And I was wrong. Not just wrong, I was cruel to you when you needed support the most." "Carol," I began, but she held up her hand. "Let me finish, please. For years, I treated you as if you were dramatic, as if you exaggerated everything, as if your feelings did not matter. I defended Ryan because it was easier to believe in him than to face the truth about who he really is. I owe you a huge apology, Eleanor, and I understand if you cannot forgive me." There were tears in her eyes. I looked at her for a long time. This sister who had wounded me with her disbelief, who had chosen the wrong side when I needed her most. But I also saw something in her that I recognized: genuine regret. "I forgive you," I said finally, "because holding a grudge would only hurt me. But things between us have to change. Carol, I need you to believe me, to respect me, to see me as your equal and not as someone to be tolerated." She nodded vigorously, wiping away tears. "I will. I promise you." And for the first time in years, I hugged my sister, feeling that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something real between us. The apartment was formally returned to my name 3 weeks after the trial. Gregory handed me the keys with a smile. "It is yours again, Eleanor. Legally, irrefutably yours." I held those keys in my hand, the same ones my father had given me years ago, and I felt his presence as if he were there with me. But when I visited the apartment, something inside me had changed. I walked through the empty rooms where my father had lived his last years, where he had been happy, where he had planned to leave me a secure legacy. And I realized something important. I no longer needed to hold on to that place to keep his memory alive. My father lived in me, in the lessons he taught me, in the strength he gave me to fight this battle. I made a decision then. I called Gregory and told him, "I want to sell the apartment. But this time, on my terms, with my authorization, legally." He seemed surprised. "Are you sure, Eleanor? You just got it back." I smiled. "Exactly. I got it back. I proved it was mine. Now I get to decide what to do with it. And I am deciding to sell it because I do not need it as a symbol anymore. I already know who I am and what I am worth." The apartment sold in 2 months for $270,000. Added to the $300,000 that Ryan had to pay by court order, I had over $500,000, more money than I had ever had in my life. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my years, to travel, to do all those things my husband and I had always dreamed of but were never able to do. The criminal case against Ryan moved forward slowly. His lawyer tried to negotiate a deal, but the prosecutor, seeing how premeditated the crime was, sought an exemplary sentence. Gregory kept me informed, but honestly, that part no longer consumed me. I had gotten my justice. What happened to Ryan after that was a consequence of his own decisions, not mine. One afternoon, while organizing papers in my house, I found an old photo of Ryan when he was 5 years old. In the picture, he was hugging me with that pure smile only children have, that innocence that has not yet been touched by greed or ambition. I held the photo for a long time and allowed the tears to finally come. I cried for the boy he was. I cried for the mother I was, who believed that love was enough to keep a family together. I cried for all the lost years, for all the broken promises, for all that could have been but never was. And after I cried, I put the photo in a drawer and closed that door in my heart, because I had learned something crucial during this battle, that loving someone does not mean letting them destroy you, that being a mother does not mean being a victim, that true family is not defined by blood but by respect, honesty, and genuine love, and that sometimes the bravest act of self-love is letting go of those who only hurt you. Ryan was my son, biologically, but he was no longer my family, not in the way that mattered. 6 months after the trial, I found myself sitting in a small cafe in Madrid, looking through the window as people walked along the cobblestone streets under a perfectly clear sky. I had a cup of coffee with milk in my hands, and a smile I could not contain. I was making the dream my husband and I had planned for years come true. To get to know Spain, to walk through its historic cities, to get lost in its museums, to taste its food. He was no longer here to share it with me physically, but I felt him in every moment, in every new flavor, in every street I explored, in every sunset I watched. And alongside him, I also felt the presence of my father, proud that I had finally used his legacy not just to survive, but to truly live. The little wooden box that held the original apartment key traveled with me in my suitcase. I no longer had the apartment, but I kept that key as a reminder, not of what I lost, but of what I got back. My dignity, my voice, my power. That small piece of metal now represented something far more valuable than a property. It represented the victory of a woman who refused to be invisible. Gregory had called me the week before with news of the criminal trial. Ryan had finally accepted a plea deal with the prosecution, 3 years in prison for fraud and forgery, with the possibility of reduction for good behavior. When I heard the sentence, I expected to feel satisfaction, maybe even joy, but all I felt was a quiet sadness and the certainty that justice, though painful, had prevailed. Do you want me to keep you informed of his situation? Gregory had asked. I thought about it for a long moment. No, I replied finally. He made his choices, and now he is living with the consequences. I have closed that chapter of my life. I need to move forward without constantly looking back, and I meant it. It was not cruelty, it was liberation. Carol visited me before I left for Europe. Our relationship was healing slowly, like a fracture that needs time to set properly. We were not the sisters we used to be, but we were building something new, something more honest. I envy you, she had said, as we drank tea on my porch. Not for the money, but for your courage, for daring to start over at 63 years old. I had smiled at her. Carol, it is never too late to start over. Age is just a number. What matters is whether you still have the will to live instead of just exist. Those words had hung in the air between us, a truth we both needed to hear. Jessica had also moved on. Her divorce was finalized, and she had started a new job at a different company, far away from everything that reminded her of Ryan. She sent me occasional messages, telling me about her progress in therapy, about how she was learning to trust again, about how she finally understood that being strong does not mean staying in situations that destroy you. You taught me it is never too late to choose the truth, she had written in her last message. Thank you for being the example I needed. Her words touched me deeply because they made me see that my battle had not just been for myself. Without knowing it, I had become an inspiration for another woman who also needed to find her own strength. Now, sitting in that cafe in Madrid, I reflected on the whole journey. From that rainy afternoon, when Gregory called me with the devastating news, to this moment of peace and fulfillment. It had been a painful journey, full of betrayal and tears, sleepless nights, and impossible decisions. But it had also been a journey of transformation. I had learned that silence is not weakness when it is chosen consciously. That solitude is not punishment when it teaches you who you really are. That age does not make you irrelevant. It gives you perspective and wisdom. That losing someone you love is sometimes necessary so you do not lose yourself. And that justice, even if it is slow to arrive, is always worth waiting for and fighting for. I thought of all the women who were probably going through similar situations at this very moment. Women being betrayed by family, being robbed, being treated as invisible just because they were older or because they lived simpler lives. And I wish they could know what I now knew, that they have more power than they imagine, that their voice matters, that it is never too late to stand up for yourself. I took out my phone and took a picture of the view from the cafe window. I uploaded it to that small social media group Carol had taught me to use, with a simple message. At 63 years old, I discovered that endings can also be beginnings. Never let anyone tell you that you are too old to defend what is yours, to start over, to live fully. Life does not end when others decide to ignore you. It ends when you decide to give up, and I chose to never give up. The comments started pouring in immediately. Women of all ages sharing their own stories of overcoming, of battles won, of moments when they chose to defend themselves against those who underestimated them. Each comment was a reminder that my story was not just mine. It was part of something much bigger, the story of all women who refused to be silenced. I finished my coffee and went out to walk the streets of Madrid. The sun shone warmly on my face, and I felt a deep gratitude for being alive, for being here, for having had the courage to fight when it would have been easier to give up. My father had left me an apartment, but the real legacy he gave me was the certainty that I was worthy, that I deserved respect, that I should never allow anyone to make me feel small. And that legacy, unlike the apartment, no one could ever steal from me. That night, before sleeping in my small hotel with a view of the Gran Via, I held the old key in my fingers one last time. Tomorrow I would visit the Prado Museum, something I had dreamed of for years. The day after tomorrow, I would take a train to Barcelona. And after that, who knew? The world was huge, and I finally had the freedom, the resources, and the strength to explore it. I put the key in its box and closed my eyes. And for the first time in many years, I slept with complete peace, because I had learned the most important lesson of all, that true power comes not from what you have, but from knowing who you are and refusing to be anything less, no matter who tries to convince you otherwise. If you ever find yourself fighting for what is right, for what is yours, For your dignity against those who betrayed you, remember this. Silence can be strategy, age can be wisdom, and a woman who finally decides to stand up for herself is the most unstoppable force in the universe. Was it worth it? Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of pain. Yes, it was absolutely worth it. Because I got myself back. And that, in the end, was the only thing that truly mattered.